All right, we're back on Morning Line. Our guest is Davidson County Sheriff Daron Hall, and we had a few people calling and just curious about the treatment of high-profile inmates, as we said earlier. It's interesting because your jail currently houses two mass shooting suspects. Now, the understanding is after we learned that Travis Reinking, they finished with him at Middle Tennessee Mental Health. So what did that mean for him?
Yeah, so there's several phases of the mental health thing. The part that he went through originally was to see if he was competent to stand trial. Okay, and that's one. And so if the answer to that is that he's incompetent to stand trial, then he would stay there forever. But they do a reevaluation of his status, meaning when he first came in and all this was happening, was he competent at that time? The answer was no by the mental health staff. At some point, and I don't know how regular, but at some point that evaluation reoccurs, and they determine, has he settled to a point where he can now stand trial? My understanding is that's what happened, gosh, a week or so ago. He moved back to us. And that's what will happen. He will stay here awaiting trial just like every other person. Now, my understanding and the way I see this is there's a whole nother evaluation to determine, was he fit or did he know what he was doing on the night of? Because it's a different situation. That's kind of whether he's guilt or innocent because he's insane. That's different. That's what people talk about. The other part was, is he competent enough to go through the trial? So at first that was no, it's now yes. But the whole issue of whether he was insane at the time that this event occurred, therefore he shouldn't be found guilty, is a whole nother issue. That
would be his defense. And so, again, he's in a special, separate area, not with any of the other inmates. Same thing, another one, Manuel Sampson. To your knowledge, has he had a mental evaluation? Was one requested? And so he is considered, at least as you sit here now, competent to stand trial.
Yes, I'm pretty sure. I mean, it would have happened before now, whether he could stand trial or not, because the whole role of getting the trial ready and all, that's underway. That's been, and that would have happened earlier. If the issue was going to be competency for trial purposes, that should have been handled a month or two into his booking, which is now, you can help me, back over a year ago. I saw the anniversary the other day. So, so the point is that will have happened already. Now, I'm not saying in trial they won't argue he was insane at the time of the event, but his competency should have been established. He's been with us the whole time. He would go back and forth to Middle Tennessee Mental Health for some of those evaluations. That's very common, but he's lived with us the whole time. As would anyone in Reinking's case or whatever. And so, yeah, they would be in what we call restrictive housing. It's restricted to 22 hours a day in your cell. There's 2 hours a day where you would be out. Basically can make phone calls to family and so forth, shower, and do your what we call rec. They're wrecked alone. And that's just kind of to prevent things we were talking about earlier. But yeah, they're very, and there's others. We have some other high-profile cases. We transferred recently the Wiggins person who we were holding for Davidson County, who was in that same area. We have 2 or 3 others, significant profile cases.
But Sampson and Reinking would never really come into contact with each other. No. But they may be in the same section, but alone. Right, and let me say this, they could have conversation. They shouldn't have contact, and conversation as in, because these are doors and they're in a in a rec area, they could communicate if they wanted to through metal doors. Remember Perry March, he was screaming through a door to another inmate about what all was going on, because they were both in the same type of housing unit back then. What was the guy's name? The question mark guy? Oh yeah. Oh, it's going to hit me. I know who you're talking about. He was the one who. Do you monitor for that in any of these cases? If something like this comes along where there's inmates that maybe have something to say, having talked to either of these guys? Yes, I mean, I'm not speaking for these cases, but we've worked with the DA's office and FBI and other investigators where we receive information or we know that there's some conversation, and if if the individual's willing to work, with authorities, and then that's how it works. But you're not saying that's happened in this case, no. But if it did, that would sure. And I've said this all a long time, but the detective work gets all the credit. They should. The prosecutors get credit. They should. But what people don't really think about is most of the significant cases that you've ever been a part of. The Marsha Trimble case, one of the lead people. Yep. The Perry March case. It's communication and conversation in jails and prisons that a lot of times lead to directly being able to pinpoint what happened. So we want to cooperate and help. Nathan Ferris. There you go. Good for you. Nathan Ferris was. I remember that. He was a key player in the Perry March trial. All right, let's get to some phone calls, Sheriff. Okay. We'll go to Wayne. Good morning, Wayne. What's on your mind? Hi, Wayne. Good morning, Nick. Good morning.
Yeah, the question I want to ask, when you had the old CJC, you also had Blackwood, and you had
CWC.
The work programs on Harding Place.
Yeah.
Now, the work program is very structured and disciplined. Blackwood is free-for-all, and the CJC basically had the felons and, categories. My question is, when somebody is sentenced to go to jail, how do they determine where they're confined? And I know they have a 23-hour solitary lockdown. What does a person do to deserve 23-hour lockdown solitary?
Great. Well, Wayne's really good. He's got the names, even the nicknames, the slang, and everything. Yeah, he's right on. Let me say, what Wayne's talking about, though, was really in normal times. And what I mean by that is back when we had the CJC and what we call HDC or Blackwood and the Harding Place, back when we had all that running at the same time, he was right. But if you don't know, the city council made a really bad decision to move our facilities back downtown. We tried to move everything to Harding. When they did that, we had to tear down what was the CJC and temporarily house people in places they shouldn't be until we can get this thing built. So right now everything is a mess as it relates to his idea. But to put it in perspective, the CJC was the most significant high-profile cases. Our new downtown detention center that's replacing it will be that same thing. It'll be where the 700 most high-profile cases are housed. We will not have a Blackwoods or a Hill Detention Center anymore. It's going away, be torn down. And so the downtown facility and our Harding Place will be the only two sites that we will have. Very high profile, high risk people downtown, everybody else on the Harding campus. If you want to think of it this way, they're low, medium, and high level of people. The highs will be downtown, the mediums and lows will be on Harding. He asked about 23-hour lockdown. It's really 22 nowadays. We do a 22 lockdown and the 2 hours out. He asked who all is locked down. A really good question, by the way. Those people who are in what we call restrictive housing, in the old days they call that maximum custody, but we just restrictive housing, you could be there because you have a disciplinary, you're acting out in the cells, you're acting out in jail, that could put you in restrictive housing. Your charges such as Reinking or Sampson could put you in restrictive housing because of the significant nature. Other people are in fear for their life and others, so therefore they're in restrictive because they want to be. So there's a lot of different types of cases that end up in what we call restrictive. There are some punitive because they're acting out, there are some by choice, and some by the level of their charges.
Gotcha. Let's go to Betty next. Betty, good morning. Hi, Betty. Are you there, Betty? Hello, Betty. She was on hold for a while. See if I can come back to her. We're gonna Pat. Hello, Pat. How are you, Pat?
Oh, doing pretty good.
Good. What's on your mind?
Well, today sets the anniversary of about 28 years ago. I visited the sheriff's fine establishment. Went well. Got out a day later. Just say, don't get out there and party too much.
So you were locked up for a while, huh? All right.
I had a night. I was wondering, why does the sheriff's department do the bulk item pickup stuff? It's not an inmate out there. I've seen them. They're in sheriff's uniform, and I just don't know what.
That's a great question.
Way budgets work nowadays. Why you guys are involved in that, and it's not something with Public Works.
That's a great question.
Bulk pickup. What kind of things are we talking about? I think I know what he's saying.
Yeah, so you have a washer or dryer and it's in your house. You can literally move it to the curb and call. And historically, years ago, you would call Public Works. We have a system that we would use inmate labor to go pick up brush, and we would go pick up bulk item and illegal dumping and all that. And so we met with Public Works years ago. Budget cuts were happening over there. Their ability to get to that was really being restricted. And so we agreed to take over bulk item, but I think Pat's question's a good one. We have struggled over the years between what to use inmate labor for and what not. For example, we've got a lot of equipment and we've got inmates that can contribute to that, and they do. They cut grass, do a lot of painting, do a lot of manual work. But there's equipment nowadays where it actually goes out and it's a truck. We call it a knuckle boom. It picks up the equipment and puts it and hauls it away. It doesn't need a lot of manual labor, and so we've evolved into that. We took over bulk item pickup because Public Works was no longer able to do it budget-wise.
What does the public call? Do they call the sheriff's department now, or do they call Public Works and they say, no, we'll transfer you?
Great call.
Because I think the average Joe probably thinks, I know there's a service for this, I'm calling Public Works. I don't think they think to call the sheriff, at least I wouldn't.
Great question. You call the call center for Metro central government, and then they divert it to us. Good question. No, that was an agreement back then. But Pat's right. I mean, you know, today we're less expensive than Public Works for several reasons. But when we started, we had inmate labor doing all sorts of things with technology of equipment. And he's right. Sometimes you'll just see the officer there pulling up to do it. But we have inmates working all over town doing other functions as well, and it's just kind of sharing that duty. And one of these days it's probably worth revisiting and saying who does and who should be doing that. But I think we're pretty effective at it. It goes back to something that we were talking about earlier. The public will demand accountability from us. I'm not saying Public Works doesn't do a good job, but there's a lot of friction back then because Public Works has all sorts of responsibilities to take care of in the city. And I think we were committed to being responsive to the public and getting this stuff picked up, and so it's worked pretty well over those years.
Yeah, you guys have been out there whenever there's been major disasters. I can think back, going back to the tornado that tore through Nashville, or gosh, those floods, and the Sheriff's Department was out there early on. I remember the deputies monitoring as the inmates were putting sandbags right down there in Riverfront Park. So you guys are very involved when it's something really big too. Let's go back. I think we have Betty back now on line 3. Hi, Betty. Are you there?
Yes, I'm here.
Hey, go ahead.
Good morning, gentlemen.
Good morning.
How are you?
Good.
I have a quick question for the sheriff.
Yes, ma'am.
What do you think about combining the Sheriff's Department and Metro Police Department together?
No,
the sheriff running it.
You know,
now we touched on it earlier, so she may have just joined us.
And Betty, right? Betty, I want to be careful. Please don't go tell everybody that Daron wants to do this because I don't want to make it about me. To be honest with you, I think that's where we ought to end up one day. It was ironic. I ran for sheriff this time, and when I was meeting with the FOP board for your interview, you interview any candidate, and of course both people running meet with them. And one of the questions the FOP board asked me at the time was, would I be willing to take over the police department? And I said, that's not why I'm running for sheriff. If the city decided to do that, I believe it could run. I believe it would be a very wise thing to do down the road. I don't want to make that about something I'm anxious or wanting to do. I have buildings we're trying to build and get the agency, but I do think it's a better plan than trying to institute something called an oversight board that's really about putting accountability.
How would that really change, though, Sheriff? If they came underneath you, you're an elected official, okay? And so you technically, or whoever the sheriff is, would be over the police department, working with the chief there. As it stands now, instead of you, it's an elected mayor who basically is the chief's boss. So now I know you have more of a law enforcement background than a mayor would be. Is that the main difference? Because, I mean, how would it be such a big difference if you as an elected official are over the police department as opposed to the elected mayor?
Yeah. So let's say, just to make a conversation, let's say that I was against body cameras.
Okay.
I'm running the organization. I don't believe we need body cameras, and you believe we do. You can hold me directly accountable for that. This whole thing we've been through with body cameras for the last, if people go back and look at this, Mayor Barry, before we ever had the first shooting that led to this, went public about wanting to put body cameras on police officers. That was never even discussed with the city council or the mayor or the police chief. That wasn't even an issue. And the point of that is the person who runs that organization of wanting body cameras or discipline, right? I mean, if you believe the officers should be fired, then I think the clear situation is you can't, you know, right now we're waiting. I've been reading for a week. The mayor is reading the Driving While Black report. Yeah. People are frustrated with the mayor. That's not about the mayor at all. It's about the police department. And so one of the leaders of this whole thing, I haven't spoken to him about this, but one of the leaders of this whole thing about community oversight and other things is Kyle Mothershead. Very active guy in the community. He's very pro that.
30 seconds.
He'll write, everything he writes, he says, how are we ever going to win when we have an unelected police chief? Now, I don't know what he means by that. But it's right that the people demand accountability from the people they put in office. And I'm not saying that makes them better people. But I don't like going and changing our charter in language like this when really what you're asking for is more direct accountability.
Which would come with an elected official like yourself down the road, perhaps.
For someone else, right, not me.
Happy Halloween.
All right,
we'll see you soon.
Okay.
Be back with a programming note right after this. Thank you.